Summer is here and the debate over tolls is heating up. Straight ahead on Face the State, will the summer of 19 be the summer of tolls? We'll discuss with State Senator Gary Winfield, a Democrat, and Vincent Candelora, a Republican state representative. Plus, the state's hottest race is the race for mayor of Hartford. The first debate is Tuesday. Reporters Rebecca Lurie of the Hartford Courant and Reggie Hales of the Hartford Enquirer are with us. And a case that's gripping the state, the disappearance of Jennifer Dulos. Today, new insight from former Assistant State's Attorney and Defense Attorney Ryan McGuigan. All straight ahead this morning, Sunday, June 23rd, 2019.
From Eyewitness News, Connecticut's most watched local political program, this is Face the State.
It's 8:30 on this Sunday morning. Good morning. I'm Dennis House. Thanks for joining us. It is going to be a long summer for lawmakers. They will be pulled off the beaches and away from the golden sun to under the Golden Dome to work on a few things in a special session, namely tolls. With us today to talk about this is State Senator Gary Winfield. He is a Democrat, and State Representative Vincent Candelora. He is a Republican. Thanks so much for being with us here today. So as of this taping, what do we know about a potential special session, Senator Winfield? Because your party's driving this.
Probably not that much. We know that we are attempting to get to tolls in some form. We know that conversations very recently began after the session with the governor. We know that we would like, if possible, to make this something that both parties come to the table and figure out how to do together.
And Republicans don't want to have a special session. They would rather delay it till next year, correct?
Well, I think the conversation needs to be about transportation, not about tolls. So let's have a more global conversation, and I think Republicans are willing to have that. But if we keep leading with the conversation of tolls, that's where things fall short.
In terms of these complaints about transportation and fix the transportation system, what, for our viewers, in your judgment, what is wrong with our system?
I think there's a lot to talk about there. I think when we talk about the transportation system, we're talking about whether or not the monies that we have for transportation go to the things that we talk about fixing. We talk about the bridges we have, the roads we have, and whether we just can, in the way that we put out to the public, actually address these issues. And that's the conversation in the Capitol. Depending on which party you're in, your perspective is that we either are not putting money to where it should go, or we are making an attempt, but there are other things we have to do as well.
What's your take on that, Representative Kemp?
Yeah, I think globally, our transportation infrastructure, we need to prioritize where we're spending the money first. So let's look at the landscape and see what we're subsidizing, essentially. I think that we need to put money into our rail, from New Haven to New York City, speed up that rail, fix some of those bridges so that the trains can run faster. And and I think Republicans would support that notion, but I think we don't necessarily need to add more revenue into the mix. We could just reallocate what we're spending right now.
Will there be something else talked about in this special session, or will it be solely for transportation?
I don't know for sure, but I think that the attempt is to limit the special session. Once you start talking about one other issue, two other issues, you begin to open this up. I don't think anybody on either side of the aisle wants to do that.
And what kind of toll structure do you support, Senator Winfield?
I'm not sure. I'm supportive largely of the concept of tolls. I think it's going to depend on what the plan actually looks like. So for me, my support is contingent upon what the actual plan is, how many tolls we have, how they're dispersed, all of those things.
Senator.
Yeah, the problem with tolls that people need to understand is it doesn't just impact people commuting to work. It impacts our whole economy. It's going to increase our costs for manufacturing to be able to ship in and out of the state. It's going to impact of course, people commuting to work. It has a significant game changer for the state of Connecticut. And I think that's why Republicans really are loath to go toward tolls. We want to look at our transportation infrastructure and see where we could best allocate the money. It's crazy that we're on a trajectory, and all of a sudden, under Governor Malloy's administration, he bankrupted the transportation fund. And there's a struggle to deal with that. Well, let's figure out why that happened first before we just pile on more revenue.
You both have been very vocal about legalizing marijuana, which did not get addressed this past session, but there was a new study out by AAA this past week that shows the number of people who are driving impaired after smoking marijuana is higher than a lot of people thought. Do you still support the legalization of marijuana?
I do still support the legalization of marijuana. We we in the state currently have to deal with the issue of people driving impaired because the states around us are moving forward. I think whatever we do, we still have to deal with that issue. So to my mind, that is not an issue to preclude me from my support for marijuana.
I know you've been against it.
Yeah, I haven't budged. And as states are moving into legalization, there needs to be a conversation of THC levels. We've got to start capping these levels. It's dangerous. Not just putting people on the road impaired, but they're ingesting 90% THC and then going on the roads, which makes it so much more dangerous than if it was 3%. So those are the global conversations that need to be had, and it's never been talked about, not just in Connecticut, but nationwide.
I want to shift gears a little bit, talk about the presidential race. As you know, Connecticut is one of the sites for a presidential debate. A finalist to potentially be one in the fall of 2020. Right now on your side, there are 21 candidates.
Yeah.
Where do you see this race going?
I think we'll know better in the coming weeks after the debates are over who looks like they are someone who can stand on that stage and survive the lights of the stage. It's very difficult right now with 20-plus candidates and the potential for more people even to get into the race to have a real sense of what's going on.
And on your side, of course, President Trump running for re-election. He didn't really help candidates this past go-around in 2018. He did better than expected, though, in 2016. How do you think he's going to do next year in this state?
It's an interesting landscape in the state of Connecticut. If you go toward Fairfield County, he's highly unpopular, and I think it impacts the ballot. You look at Eastern Connecticut, and Republicans gained many seats during his term, and he's maintained his popularity. So, Connecticut is going to be, I think, very schizophrenic when it comes to this next election cycle.
There's a big generational gap among the Democratic field this year. We have some candidates in their 70s. Elizabeth Warren is almost 70, I believe. Joe Biden's in his 70s. Bernie Sanders, and we've got some younger ones in their 30s, 40s, and 50s. Senator Cory Booker and Vice President Biden kind of going back and forth on what Biden said about some former segregationist senators. What's your take on that?
I think Senator Cory Booker was correct. I think Joe Biden needs to think about what his position is here. So it's one thing to work with people. I work with people who have different positions than I do all the time. It's another thing to see these people as people who you take into your inner circle who are close to you. I think it's important for Joe Biden to think about what he's putting forward. This is a political campaign. One of the questions is, how do you think? And when Joe Biden puts forward this as something to suggest that he's the person that we want to be the standard bearer for the party, I think it's something for us all to take a step back and ask, is that correct?
Representative Candelora, we don't really matter much in the presidential races here because our primary is just so late. And I'm wondering, because legislatures across the country have done quite a bit to protect their status. New Hampshire, they have laws, well, it must be X date, and other states do as well. What can you and your legislative body do to make our state a little bit more important? Perhaps an earlier primary, maybe a primary on a Saturday?
Well, I know we've discussed that issue of the earlier primaries, and I'm not sure we sort of get beaten down every time that gets raised. But
why can't we stand up for ourselves and say we must have an earlier primary?
Well, Connecticut is a big source of fundraising for all candidates on both sides of the aisle. So I think we should certainly maybe exert our leverage through the dollars that are donated into these presidential races. And I think the first start is the fact that we are in the running for a presidential debate. Possibly coming up. So I think we start there and we try to assert ourselves maybe through the primary process afterward.
When Barack Obama ran for president in 2008 for the first time, our primary, I believe, was early February, maybe February 5th, something like that. And it was kind of competitive. We had some candidates. By the time our primary rolls around in the spring, your 20 Democrats might be down to 2. Mm-hmm. So what can we do to be more of a player?
I think Vinny brings up a way of thinking about this. I think part of the thing, too, is what states ultimately matter towards winning the race. And I think that's why in the last several years we've had a conversation about the national popular vote, which some people may disagree with, but it changes the landscape and how states are important.
Senator Gary Winfield, Representative Vincent Candelora, thanks so much for being with us. And maybe in 2024 we'll have a better primary day. We'll have to wait and see. Thank you, gentlemen. When we come back, we're going to be talking about the Doulos case that everyone seems to be talking about. Also, the hottest race this year. Did you know it is an election year here in Connecticut? We'll be talking about that after the break, and we welcome you to check out some past editions of Face the State on our YouTube channel or our app right now.